Hi there guys, welcome along to our build guide for the Tapir / Hoofstock browse spinner. So we've tested this out with Tapir, works absolutely amazing, but obviously it can be used with lots of different hoofstock. I'm sure it can be adapted for other species as well. So if you want to head straight to the build guide part of this, just head to the timestamp on the screen at the moment, and I'm just going to quickly run over with you how this works. So basically we have a pole right here in the middle of the screen, which is cemented into the ground. You can use postcrete if you like. And then essentially the device just slides over the top of this, and it sits on a lazy Susan, which you can see just in the middle of here, and this is what actually allows the device to rotate. So the idea is that you can hang browse directly into these eyes, or you can obviously put different feeders on there if you've got, say for instance feeder balls or that kind of thing. You can hang these on here using D-shackles if you like. And as the animals are browsing from this entire device then actually spins around. So it just makes it a little bit trickier for the animals to get the food, and obviously making the feed last much longer. So it's a great little device. It's actually relatively easy to build. So let's get straight on with the build guide. So in order to create this device, we always start with the pole. So we use a 100mm wide pole, and then that actually dictates the measurements of the rest of the build. And as far as the length goes, we either use 2 meters or 2.4 meters. But the most important thing is that it's actually in the ground by a meter. And directly in the center of the pole, you have a rod which is basically put down into it. So what you do is you drill a hole using an auger bit if you want, actually drill straight down into the center. We normally go about 200 mils and then drop a rod down into it, and here you can see it's actually sticking out from the top by, what have we got here, it's around about 60 mils. So the reason we go a meter into the ground is basically to make sure it's strong, because as always, animals are never going to use these devices exactly as you intend, and who knows, it'll probably end up becoming a scratching pole. So you can see here it goes in the ground by about a meter, but obviously the actual height of the device is going to be determined by the height out of the ground here. So that's going to be for you to decide. So to make the spinning device itself, obviously we're going to be using timber, and it's all made out of exactly the same timber, held together either with coach screws or normal screws, but as with all of our builds it's always 2 screws in each joint. Okay, so just make sure it's nice and strong. So the timber which we've used to build this is 95 by 45. So we start off basically by creating 2 squares. So the length which we went for is 155. And you can see as we add these on, remember the pole was 100mm wide, that means that this hole in the center here is just a little bit wider than that at 110. So when the pole slides up through this hole, there's basically enough space for it to be able to move either side without actually catching on the pole itself. So as mentioned, 2 screws in each of these joints, create your square, and then once you've done that, you're actually going to need to make 2 of these, like this. And the distance that you're going to want these apart, and it'll make sense in just a moment how we actually join them together, is 100 mils. So next up, you're going to need a piece of timber. So this is obviously what holds these 2 apart by that 100 mils. So it's exactly the same timber as what you've just used there, and the length of this is 340 mil, and the distance with this gap at the top here is 50 mil. Okay, so 340 for the length of this timber, 50 mil from the top, and that's basically going to give enough room for the lazy Susan to work, and then obviously 100 mil between the 2. So you're going to need to cut 4 of these, and they will basically go on all 4 sides. So obviously making sure that they're nicely centered, because not only are these pieces of timber to hold these squares apart, also for the arms to sit on top just like this, and obviously that will be held down as well. But before we do that, before we attach these arms onto the top, you're going to need to make a hole up through the center. Okay, now this is what that threaded rod which sits on top of the pole is going to go up through. So it's just a guide basically to keep it in place. And then on the bottom you're going to attach a Lazy Susan. Now a Lazy Susan is obviously the device which actually spins, and if I show you just here, it's actually made in two halves. So you've got the bottom half, the upper half, and they actually spin separate from each other. So the way that you would attach it onto the underneath of these arms, you've got the 4 holes just here. Basically screw them up into the arms, and then these 4 holes you're going to just completely ignore, because this is literally just going to rest on top of that pole. So once you've got that in place, you can then obviously attach it onto the top of those boxes and the uprights which you've already made. Now with regards to the length of the arms themselves, obviously it's up to you how wide do you want it to be, but remember the idea of this is that you can move it sort of fairly easily. So this is what we did. We went 1500, and then of course this way is also 1500, but as you can see it's actually cut in 2 pieces, so each arm is 702 going in that direction. So obviously you've got this joint just here, and it's a little bit trickier because you can screw down into there, you can screw down into there, but ideally you want this piece and this piece attached to this piece, so you can screw in through the side at an angle into this this longer beam here, but obviously making sure you don't end up with a screw going through the center of that hole just there. Now we're going to need to put our supporting arms on as well. So these here are basically, you have a 45-degree cut on each end, and the idea is that it sits right down at the bottom here. The total length is 481, so that's the length before you put the 45 degrees on, and then obviously you can put the 45 degrees on just at the ends there. And obviously the idea of those is to actually support these arms, because of course the animals are going to be pulling down on them as they're getting the browse out of it, so this just really sort of helps to make it a lot stronger. So of course you're going to need 4 of those, so 1 on each arm, popping them out like that, and then finally you're going to want to put in your eye bolts in the ends of the arms just here. So normally we'd actually drill like a pilot hole and then actually screw them through, and occasionally these actually come with a nut which you can then put across on the other end there, sometimes with a washer as well. And then that's it. It's just a case of then sliding it over the top of the pole, which by now should be well and truly set in the ground, and because of that Lazy Susan, it's going to spin around beautifully. So of course it's up to you what you want to hang on the ends of it. You know, it can be different feeders, you know, browse, whatever you like, but this is really going to obviously make your animals work a little bit harder for their food. So hope you enjoyed this. Let us know how you get on. Please do share with us any results, and thanks for joining us.